Spain. Rodney, at present, is the Director of the Data Processing Department for the Government of Barbados. And I invite Rodney now to take us through the webinar. Rodney?
Thank you very much, Nigel. I trust that everyone is hearing me. And I want to welcome everyone again to the ARIN-CTU webinar series. And today we're focusing on accelerating 21st century government in the Caribbean. And there was a time when we would welcome participants in the room, and then we would welcome our online participants. But today, all of our participants are online, and that is actually a sign of the times that we're living in. And I am very pleased to be to kick off this session as the first moderator for the 4-part series. And I think today's topic is very, very relevant, very topical with respect to 21st century government. And those of you who joined us early would have seen the short video clip from the CTU, and it was very, very enlightening with respect to the comments about governments operating as though they're in a different century. So what is 21st century government, and why should we care about that? And what are the implications for the Caribbean? And the CTU, as Nigel mentioned, I had the honor and privilege of working there for 4 years. And the CTU has been at the forefront of driving the public sector digital transformation agenda. That's another way of looking at the 21st century government in the Caribbean. And also we have with us Mr. John Turan, CEO of the American Registry for Internet Numbers. And I'm really pleased that to share this forum with such distinguished guests. The agenda for this webinar, Nigel would have pointed out, is accessible via the link in the chat. And my role today is moderator. I'm Rodney Taylor, Director of the Data Processing Department in the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology for the Government of Barbados. And my job today is not to talk too much, but really just to introduce the panelists and guide the discussion so that we have a very enriched experience today. And we really hope that we want to invite your questions. We invite you to listen attentively. Think of your questions ahead of time. You can post them in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to entertain those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Secretary General Bernadette Lewis to give us the first presentation. She will be followed by the CEO of the American Registry for Internet Numbers. And then we will go into discussion and the Q&A session. So I really thank you all for joining us. I see 55 participants here joining us, and I hope that that number will grow, but that indeed is a very significant number. We thank you all for taking the time to be a part of this discussion. So without further ado, I invite Secretary General Bernadette Lewis to begin her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodney. And I'm very thankful that we do have 55 people online joining us. It's really a privilege to have the opportunity to address you on this subject of 21st century government. It is an initiative of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, which was launched in January 2018 in Antigua and Barbuda. And the 21st Century Government Initiative, it represents a significant implementation element of the CARICOM single ICT space, which was approved by the CARICOM heads of government in February 2017. And this initiative seeks to create within our Caribbean member states governments that are citizen-centric, resilient, seamless, and that make effective use of information and communication technologies to deliver services to its citizens, and also that the governments are fit for purpose in the 21st century. And I just want to start by talking a little bit about the foundation of our Caribbean governments. And they are essentially based on systems that are centuries old, optimized for paper-ending technologies, designed for colonial rule to dominate subjects. And typically, in the current environment, our governments are resource intensive. We have many workers, we have many public servants dedicated to creating, collecting, analyzing information, recording, replicating information, and in that process, generating lots of paper. And then you need people to transport that paper up and down and deliver it. You have physical storage repositories, then the office space, equipment, transport, security. All of those things are very labor, resource intensive. And in addition to being resource intensive, they're also, all of our systems are also very vulnerable to rodents. I mean, you've heard it, the evidence disappeared because the rats ate it, or the hurricanes that have, 2017 was a classic example. Lots of government information was lost. Of course, the ever-present threat of fire and theft, all of these things make for a very inefficient, vulnerable system. And I also want to talk about our governments themselves and its relationship to its citizens in this 21st century. And governments have a unique relationship with its citizens. It's the only institution with which a citizen must consistently interface directly or indirectly through every phase of life from birth until death. So at birth, they have to register the child. The birth of the child has to be registered at the registry. For immunization, you have to go to the Ministry of Health. For schooling, registration and getting your child in school, you have to go to the Ministry of Education. For when you graduate and you're employed now, you have to be registered with the Ministry of Finance for taxation purposes. And every step of that life cycle, you are interfacing with the government, but a particular ministry or a particular government agency. And consequently, the government is the only institution with this sort of relationship with the citizens of the country. And therefore, the government has a responsibility to create and maintain systems and processes that efficiently service the needs of their citizens and enable them to participate effectively in national life and the development of the country. But government as a whole hardly knows its citizens because their information, their relationships are distributed across all of the government ministries and agencies with which they interact. And when you compound this with the inefficiency of that paper-based, time-limited, physical systems, it becomes very inefficient. And therefore, for one citizen to transact, do a single transaction with the government, he may have to visit several ministries to collect his information, which is already within the government. And of course, so he goes to the first and you give your name, your address, your mother's maiden name, your father's maiden name, and they go and they search, and then they come back and they give you the information which you take to the next ministry, and the process repeats itself. This is extremely inefficient, and a transaction could take several days or several weeks, resulting in high costs, great inefficiency, lost time, and very dissatisfied, frustrated citizens. So our centuries-year-old government systems and processes, they are in fact in conflict and indeed anachronistic to what is available in terms of information and communication technologies in the 21st century. So we've said the processes are inefficient and slow, and the goal of 21st century government is to optimize the government's processes for 21st century technology. And it starts, and if we look at this pyramid, this sort of captures the things that have to be done for government to be optimized for 21st century government. And if you start at the base of the pyramid, it requires infrastructure, broadband, IP-based, unified infrastructure for the government. And we're looking at a government-wide area network. Then it calls for digitization of all the government's information, not just on citizens, but on the government's assets, on the national assets, everything, and the integration of all of this information so that it is available in every ministry from every government agency as required. Of course, it calls for streamlining of processes. Some of the things that we may be doing may not make sense, may not even be necessary. And we need to re-examine what are the needs of the citizen and design the processes that enable us to deliver, to streamline services and deliver them to the citizens. Of course, this is going to take business process re-engineering. It's going to take change management. It's going to take changing mindsets, and so that you have the public service that understands that the citizen is the focus of all of this. So you're working also towards consistent input and delivery channels. And you would need to create an enabling environment of legislation and policy and regulations. Because as it stands in some countries in the region at this time, the laws actually do not allow different ministries to share information on citizens. So there's a lot of work that happens behind all of this. But if the government could effectively adopt information and communication technologies, they could use these technologies to efficiently and effectively deliver the services to its citizens. And the citizen is the focus of all of our efforts. Of all the citizen is the focus of all these activities. The government is here to serve the citizen. And at the center, so this slide depicts the citizen and his 21st century government. At the center, as I said, of the government is the citizen. And each citizen is issued a unique identifier that associated with which is all of his transactions with the government, so that the information pertaining to the citizen isn't distributed across all the government ministries. It is associated with his electronic ID. And so that the citizen is able to go to any ministry, any service delivery channel. He could stay from his home. He could do things from his mobile device, because all of the services and transactions in a 21st century government are enabled by the technology. And consequently, the citizen is now the primary focus. The government now serves the citizen. And perhaps we could do the second poll, because I managed to miss the cue for the first one. So we could see if you all are grasping the the concept of what a 21st century government is. So we see all three. Great. So right? And I'm looking at the results. I think certainly people have captured some of the elements of what a 21st century government is about. So I'm going to stop. Yes, so what the CTU has been doing, we have been working with member countries to encourage them to make use of the technology and use it effectively. Now, we've been hearing about e-government services for 25 years, but the challenge has been that the e-government services, yes, they use the technology, but they are all associated with a ministry and they are siloed. So you're still following that pattern of siloed implementation of e-government services, and that is not efficient because a citizen will still need to visit different ministries to come to the point where they collect the information and bring it to the to the ministry with which they need to do a transaction. So the difficulty with when we say e-government services, it's still siloed. It is not seamless. So we have moved away from that notion of e-government service to say 21st century government, governments that are citizen-centric, seamless, and are responsive to the needs of the citizen. Now, just in closing, I just want to make a few statements. The migration to 21st century government, it requires a champion at the highest level of government. It absolutely requires a champion, and that in order to keep the focus of the ministers on the goal. So one of the things that we always specify is that a champion is required. And it's not something that happens overnight. It requires many, many steps. It's a complex undertaking and it's not impossible. And it also may require us to discard the impotent systems that no longer serve our best interest in order to leverage the full potential of ICT to transform our governments. And we really need our heads of government to commit to embracing this. And if we could have all be on the same page in terms of where we're going, once we establish many 21st century Caribbean governments, the whole issue of interactions and the sharing, meaningful sharing of information between governments seamlessly in the region becomes a very real possibility, and it takes us further along the road for a CARICOM single ICT space. As I said, it takes time, but there will be some quick wins. There are things that we could do immediately. And I think our biggest challenge is really changing the mindsets of the governments, and that the governments stay the course. It's not a quick win. It's a journey that we're on. Acquiring technology is costly, but I believe if we pooled our limited resources, we can achieve this. And above all, collaboration is mandatory. At the governmental level, interministerial collaboration is absolutely necessary. And also at the regional level, intergovernmental collaboration is necessary. So with those few comments, I think based on the results of the poll, it was clear that people have grasped that the 21st century government it's citizen-centric. It restores the citizen to where he's supposed to be, that government is in service of the citizens, And it is seamless, it is resilient, and it uses the technology of the day to effectively and efficiently deliver the services to its citizens. And with that, Rodney, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. Always very passionate about these issues, and we really appreciate the work you have been doing in the region in this regard. I have actually read the policy document on 21st century government, and I found it very, very interesting. You covered a lot of topics today, and I hope they will generate some discussion, including the EID. And of course, that is one of the critical, it was at the pinnacle actually of the pyramid. And of course, issues around EID involves issue of privacy and data protection. Are citizens comfortable and satisfied that government will adhere to, and protect their data, and that they will have control and access of that? And of course, that requires strong legal and regulatory frameworks in order to protect citizen data.
That's right.
You mentioned government-wide area networks, and I'm actually very keen on hearing John's presentation, which follows, covering the internet policy development and how that impacts on regional internet infrastructure in things like IXPs and ASNs and so on, and what are the policy issues that we should be concerned about in the region to help build resilient government networks. You also mentioned things like champions at the highest level, and of course, the highest level in the Caribbean context is none other than the Prime Minister, in some cases, the President. And how do we deal with that in the context of the political and election cycles? How do we establish continuity between political administrations so that we have a long-term view despite the short-term political imperatives? You covered mindsets, and that, of course, is very, very critical. We can set up government-wide area networks, you can implement systems. How do we change our behavior or culture with respect to service delivery and put the citizen at the center? You also mentioned the pooling of regional resources, and that always, of course, is critical in the context of the single ICT space in the region. And how do we make that a reality in the regional context with the disparities that exist within our CARICOM member states? But my job, as I mentioned in the beginning, is not to speak so much today, but to allow our panelists to speak and to entertain questions and to kind of guide the discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Mr. John Curran. In my tenure at the CTU, I worked with John Curran in the Caribbean ICT Roadshow. I distinctly remember us doing a roadshow in Dominica together. And I'm pleased to share the panel with him. He's the CEO of the ARIN, and he's going to speak on ARIN perspectives on global internet policy, priorities and trends. And before John comes on, I want to also welcome our YouTube audience. I was informed that we also have, in addition to our 62 participants on Zoom, we also have a YouTube following that seems to be growing. So I want to welcome you and thank you all for joining us today. And John, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rodney. I'm very pleased to be here this morning. Very happy to see the participants on the session and within the YouTube. I'd like to elaborate on Bernadette's remarks a little bit on the digital transformation of government, and add a little bit more, talk about what's happening in the internet community, particularly in terms of standards and policy development, and then talk about a timely topic that we're all facing. In fact, the COVID pandemic that we're all dealing with, and how it might impact some of this. So as Bernadette highlighted, digital transformation of government's a challenging task. You've got many touch points between citizens and government. You have all the various complicated involvement of all the interactions they might have, the challenges involving and taking what are paper processes and looking at creating their digital equivalents, replicating them, or even better, re-engineering them. can be quite daunting. Systems, the interface of those systems and the processes to laws, policies, and regulations means that it's a challenge. It really is, to try to figure out how governments can take advantage of the opportunity of digital transformation. Interestingly enough, that's actually common in the telecom industry itself as well. Telecom industry and a lot of businesses that use telecommunications and the internet have been challenged with how to make that digital transformation. We're all familiar with businesses that even to this day, you want to send them something, an email, and they say, no, I'm sorry, I need a paper copy, or I need a copy of that faxed, or it needs to be done in an unusual way because that's how our processes work. And it's true that the online world, as much as we like to think about all the advantages, doing that transformation doesn't come naturally. People think about what they need to do to get a job done, but they think about how they've been doing it and how to make that digital. And that's not really transformation. That's more like migration. Transformation is the business process reengineering that Bernadette talked about. And it doesn't come naturally in any field, whether that's governments or whether that's the internet industry. As it turns out, though, we're all having a seminar today, and none of us are in the room together. We've actually transitioned from having a seminar that we normally would all gather for. And there's use in getting together, but we're going to have a very effective one, and we're going to do it entirely online. And we're driven to this transformation to an online format by the pandemic that we're facing today. Similarly, that's happened in businesses all over the world. Businesses are looking at their processes and trying to figure out which of these processes do they really need to stay in contact with their customers? Which of these processes are essential, and how do they conduct them? Do they really need to meet with someone? Do they really need to have a face-to-face contact? We all use the internet every day, and ironically, the internet standards industry and the internet people who do internet policy work, we're actually most famous for traveling around the globe and meeting with one another. It was an irony that we talk about in past years, that wouldn't it be great if we had a tool like that would allow us to communicate so we didn't have to do all these trips. This is the year we actually get to discover that we don't need to do the travel that we've been doing, or at least not as much. That indeed, a lot of the work that we've been doing face-to-face can be done online. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about. And then I'm going to come back and talk about governments again. So a lot of the internet standards community has actually done that pivot. So if we look, for example, at the regional internet registries, of which ARIN is one, and LACNIC, APNIC, RIPE, and AFRINIC are the other four, we have all been transitioned to online meetings. And we're conducting our policy work, then developing the policies for how we run our registry and our services entirely online. We actually just completed one last month in ARIN, and we actually had comments that to some extent it was actually more effective than face-to-face. Something on our own natural evolution we probably wouldn't have discovered if we weren't forced to consider an entirely online format. Well, RIPE similarly had a meeting last month, and it had record attendance and even had social events online to make up for the face-to-face activities. Again, a remarkably successful sort of activity. So we find that the crisis before us has caused us to really look and say, what does need to happen? In the standards side, many of the standards bodies, the IETF has now converted to an online format, and that actually in some ways opens things up, because while we've always had online participation, you have those in the room and those online, and they may not be on even footing. And those in the room have the advantage of the resources and the freedom of time and funds and support to be able to travel. Those in the room may not feel that they have equal participation. On a completely online format, everyone has equal participation and equal weight. And so to some extent, we've actually benefited in exploring the transition to really digital transformation because we've had no choice. Some of the international standards bodies, example, the ITU, they've moved many of their study groups to online format and in fact are continuing to meet. And these are now something that you might not have managed to get on a plane and go to Geneva, but now there's an openness associated with it in that more people can participate, and meetings that you might not have attended a study group because you didn't want to have one more bit of travel are now available because, well, they're all available online. So this digital transformation has come through calamity. It has come to the internet community, and we're doing this in terms of how we do standards, how we do protocols, how we do operation of the registries. And it is interesting that necessity makes solutions. And so we have a little bit of that. I want to bring it back to governments. We have an opportunity here. I don't want to talk about the blessing that COVID-19 is. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that in this crisis, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we have a unique opportunity before us for re-examination and re-engineering. It's happened in some countries already. Countries look and go, I need to meet the needs of my citizens. I need to satisfy them regardless of what's going on. So what's the minimum that I really do need in this business process? For example, in the United States, where the crisis has hit unusually hard, as it turns out, there's a lot of burdens associated with medical licensing. Ability of a nurse to work in one state to another isn't automatic. All of that was re-examined by states and said, no, we don't need the burden of additional training and additional licensing. We're really talking about a skilled professional moving from one location to the other. This should be something that's online and automatic. And so necessity has caused re-evaluation of those business processes to say, what is really here? What is the important part we need to cover? Yes, we need to know their license. We need to have them registered. But do we really need everything else? And that's happening across the board in many business processes and many governments today. They're trying to determine what exactly is it that we have to have, not what we'd like to have, not what we've been asking for, but really what is essential for doing our job. We need to continue to function in this situation, and we don't want to lose the benefits of being able to do digital transformation and continue our operation online simply because we have a process that requires a face-to-face meeting or requires one more form or requires someone to go into one ministry and then walk down the hall to another one. So we're seeing a forced transformation. And I'd like people to think about this as an opportunity. Governments sometimes have unique abilities in crisis. You can actually pick up and set aside a regulation temporarily because it's interfering with your ability to serve your citizens. And that is happening. People are saying, because of crisis, we're changing this so that we can still function in a digital online manner. It may be, in fact, that we see more digital transformation because of the crisis we all face collectively than we've seen happening organically, because this is an unforeseen event and it's come upon us quickly, and therefore governments are responding equally quickly. They've come to realize this may be with us for the long term. So it's time for us to take this, recognize the severity, recognize the dire situation that's been created, but at the same time recognize the opportunity, okay? Inability to get together, inability to have offices open means it's time to focus on what's essential and set aside impediments. Do rapid re-engineering, maybe not the best process, maybe not the perfect process, maybe not the best system, but enough to get the job done. And I see a small silver lining here in the ability for governments to take this situation and use it to help advance their digital transformation in a way that might not have otherwise been available. I ask that governments don't waste this opportunity and truly realize that this was a path they were going on, and now perhaps there's a chance to prioritize and accelerate some of it in a way that's responsive to the needs of their communities. That actually concludes my remarks. I promised I wouldn't go too long, and so I'll now turn it back over so we can do questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate that presentation. A lot of key points in there with respect to governments and the need to re-examine processes and whether we really do need them. That is something that here in Barbados, we are definitely grappling with, and the new political administration in 2018 actually carried out a national survey to see, what government, and they asked citizens, what services do we really need from government, and what services can be better provided in a private sector environment. So that's one of the key issues. But then we weigh that against the role of government as an employer, as a creator of jobs, the need for government to create jobs. So it's not just a question of maybe making processes more efficient and the implications for staffing and employment and jobs because of the more efficient now online environment. I also took note of your references to online meetings for ARIN and LACNIC. I myself have been able to participate a little more actively in the ICANN meetings, the Governmental Advisory Committee meetings, because they're mostly virtual. And it's so much easier to participate. But I question whether that necessarily means that we have equal participation, because now, yes, we can participate, but do we have the resources, and do we have what impact are we having on the agenda as a region in the Caribbean, on the global agenda, not just sitting in the room, but are we influencing, are we guiding, are we providing input with respect to the policy development process? That is key. And so it is good to participate virtually, but we also need to consolidate our own issues and be able to have a voice within the global fora. We've gone through in Barbados, you mentioned the review of processes for the police certificate of character, for example. That is now, since COVID, been an online process that normally would take weeks, in fact, because you had to go before the police department, but that now is actually fully automated and is delivered within a 24-hour cycle. You also mentioned, I'll finally say, rapid re-engineering. And the crisis has led us to that point where even in schools and the delivery of online education, because schools were closed and schools had to rapidly ramp up the infrastructure to provide services, but that brought a whole set of issues: access to devices, access to the internet, affordable access, and so on, and would that exacerbate the digital divide? So a lot of interesting points, and I want to thank you for that. We do already have a question here with respect to whether the presentations will be available. Of course, you didn't have any slides, but S.C. Lewis did have a few, and I assume that she would have no difficulty in sharing those with the participants. One question that is on the table, though, is what do you see as the role of the multi-stakeholder community in the development of 21st century government? So that's actually posed by Albert Daniels, who himself is a representative of ICANN. And I know CTU does a lot of collaboration. This webinar itself represents a collaborative effort, but what is the role of multi-stakeholder groups? So we have ISOC in the region, the various chapters, and so on, other stakeholders. What is the role of stakeholders in this whole 21st century transformation? And let me give both of you an opportunity to answer that. And since you had the floor last, John, I'll ask you that question, and then I'll hand it over to S.C. Lewis.
Right. Thank you. That is indeed an excellent question. In our view, from the CTU's perspective, no single stakeholder has the answers, right? And it calls, I think at the end of my presentation, I spoke to the need for collaboration. I mentioned interministerial collaboration and intergovernmental collaboration, but also multi-stakeholder collaboration. And as you know, the CTU, or you may not know, the CTU is not strictly governmental. We have within our membership the private sector and civil society members who contribute to the development of our policies and our programs. So no one, this is a collective responsibility, and therefore the multi-stakeholder community has a role to play. And we will, we encourage you, because we've already sort of mapped out, for example, certain roles for organizations like our partner ARIN and ISOC in terms of building capacity and expertise in the area of internet governance, in things like DNSSEC, IPv6, and they've been doing a great deal of work in that area, because the CTU certainly does not have that level of resource and expertise to deliver that sort of training. So these sort of partnerships are vital to the process. And in our program for 21st Century Government, we have identified the roles for other stakeholders where we cannot, even within our member community, we may not have the expertise and resources to deliver. And the one thing I want to speak about is the need to build the capacity, to build expertise, to cultivate a group of public servants and individuals who understand the issues and who can participate in a meaningful way at the international fora. And building that capacity, it must be done. It's a collective responsibility. So we at the CTU could speak to 21st Century Government, but ARIN could speak to the need for IPv6 and DNSSEC and so on and so forth. It is a collective responsibility, and the governments cannot do it alone.
So,
thank you, John. Yep, go right ahead.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit on what Bernadette said, and respond Mr. Daniels' excellent question, obviously. The question isn't so much what is the role of the multi-stakeholder community, it's what's the role of the multi-stakeholder communities, plural. And what I mean by that is that in each subject area, there is a multi-stakeholder community that comes together, working with these organizations. In the area of DNS and DNS security, it's the ICANN multi-stakeholder community. When it comes to use of IP addresses and routing security, it's the regional internet registries, the IETF, the initiatives at ISOC. All of these are communities. When it comes to anti-spam, there's a community associated with MOG that does work. Each of these communities is multi-stakeholder, allowing governments and industry and civil society to all participate. So the most important thing, as Bernadette highlighted, the expertise and the capacity building really has to happen in communities that have the people who have the experience. So you need to leverage these various associations and forum in order to look at problems, come up with things like best practices, come up with solutions to problems. Now, when it comes back to government needs to liaison with these organizations and understand that it wants to not be driven by them, but be informed by them, work with its own citizens to make its own decisions, but be well informed about what the multi-stakeholder communities, where the expertise, where the discussion of these on a multi-stakeholder basis take place, where these things are occurring. And what that gives you is a certain strength in both directions. The strength is that, at the end of the day, governments have to serve their citizens, and each government faces its own priorities and its own trade-offs. And not every government is going to handle a problem the same way. We can see that globally, but a lot of governments want to be informed about what is common practices, what is recommended practices, what are the best practices that are suggested. And that's what these multi-stakeholder groups are good at generating. At the end of the day, the government needs to decide what makes sense. The advantage of leveraging the multi-stakeholder communities in each of these various forums is that A, you get an answer that's well considered, has had governments and civil society participate. If a government has the resources to participate and is interested in one, it should engage in ICANN, or it should engage with the RIRs, or it should engage with the operator forums, but only if it has the resources and the interest to do so. Even if it doesn't directly engage, it gets the benefit of those outputs. Those outputs can inform its decision-making. And that gives it both technically sound advice and advice that's actually common across a large part of the internet, because the outputs of these various forums are intended to be applied internet-wide to a very large community. And by paying attention to them, governments benefit. So I don't think that the multi-stakeholder communities working in these various forums, whether it's the IETF or ICANN or the RIRs or the Internet Society and the operator community, I don't think we drive 21st century government. I think we inform, we build capacity, we create paths forward that government should be aware of, so that they have a little bit of a trailblazer out in front of them, pointing one direction to go.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Bernadette, for those answers. I totally agree. I know that there's a lot of work being done by stakeholder groups such as CARIB-NOG with respect to building capacity in the region. They've had a series of webinars as well, looking at the resiliency of the regional internet infrastructure. And we're also of several ISOC chapters that have been established in the region that help to bring national, the issue of internet policy development to the national fora for discussion. Events like ARIN on the Road, which we've had one here in Barbados as well. The ICANN readouts, again, proud to have hosted one in Barbados. And I agree that we need to drive and increase participation in these fora so that that our issues are well represented, and that governments need to dedicate the resources. And of course, the resources are linked also to interest. And I think one of the challenges is to get policymakers to understand the significance or the relevance of these global discussions on internet policy and 21st government to the bread and butter issues. So what I call the bread and butter issues is the issues of supply of water, for example, the creation of jobs, you know, and these issues sometimes seem a bit more esoteric to the everyday issues that our political directorate have to deal with. I have a few questions on my own, but I'm actually going to give way to some other questions we have here. There was a question with respect to how much coming together has CTU seen in what sectors, what are Caribbean priorities? So we know that the region needs to come together, but how much is that happening? And in what sectors is that happening? Of course, CTU has responsibility for the telecom sector. Does that mean happen in the telecom sector with respect to single ICT space? Are there other sectors that we're seeing coming together with respect to this digital imperative within the Caribbean? I'll pass that over to Bernadette.
Thank you, Rodney. That is also a very interesting question. And I go back to my comment for the need for collaboration. We have a vision at the regional level, the vision and roadmap for the CARICOM single ICT space. And that the CARICOM single ICT space is envisioned as the digital layer for the Caribbean single market and economy. So the CARICOM single ICT space is very important, but it's not going to happen until Caribbean governments start to collaborate in a meaningful way, right? And I recognize that even though decisions are being made at a regional level, at the end of the day, the national priorities, those bread and butter issues, Rodney, that you just referred to, those things take priority, you know, and understandably so. But it would help tremendously, it will help our cause tremendously if the decisions that are taken at the regional level, if there is some element of implementation at the national level. And that is how that is the sort of coming together that I would like to see happening, but it's not. But again, I like John, I'm very thankful. COVID-19 has changed the priorities. I think it has certainly brought to the fore what is really important. Yes. So now you hear governments talking about accelerating the adoption of ICT and so on. And you hear them talking about now wanting to collaborate because they recognize, you know, that we have to move quickly, but we need to move together. So I am optimistic that I'm seeing a greater degree of willingness to work together. And I'm hoping that that willingness translates to action and that the action comes quickly, because this window of opportunity here that COVID-19 has presented, it is closing. Yes, and you don't want people to fall back into their old ways when a new vista is opening up before us. And that vista, we have to, the CTU established in 2016 a collaboration forum to help bring in the ICT industry the stakeholders together, and not just nationally but regionally. And these are things that that absolutely have to be done if we are going to be able to survive and thrive as a region. We have to work together. Those are my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bernadette. John, I know that you are, I believe you're based in the US, but we don't have a federation here in the Caribbean. We have we have CARICOM, and maybe based on your experience in the US with your federal system, maybe you can offer some words of wisdom for the regional governments with respect to collaboration in more meaningful ways despite the national imperatives.
Yes, actually, ARIN serves Canada, US, and approximately half of the Caribbean. So I do spend a bit of time discussing with ministers and meeting both through CTU and CARICOM with them top priorities. The point I would make is that it is true that each government, each national government has its own priorities. They're bread and butter issues. You cannot avoid paying attention to things like roads and water and education and healthcare, and no one is suggesting otherwise. But I do want to emphasize that there's a unique aspect to communication as one of those key issues. In times of crisis, communication becomes all important, whether we're talking about this pandemic or the next hurricane that passes through. We've seen that time and time again. I've been on calls on an emergency basis trying to figure out how to get connectivity to one or more Caribbean economies because of a hurricane or because of some other calamity. I've never had someone say, oh, I wish I didn't spend time working on better connectivity. I wish I didn't spend time working on better infrastructure. I've had the exact opposite happen time and time again. And I will just say that there's a certain flexibility and resiliency that comes from internet infrastructure investment and ICT investment that provides the government options and flexibility that is a leveraging factor that may not occur with other bread and butter investments. To the extent that you have infrastructure now, for example, there are governments that are figuring out how to keep their processes flowing because they have the ability to do it via digital transformation. So I guess my only point is that I don't think that people should think of it as either or, but in their prioritization, recognize digital transformation, investing in infrastructure, investing in connectivity for the citizens, investing in exchange points so you have more bandwidth available and more local connectivity, is a leveraged investment that will pay off. I can't say how it will pay off. That depends on what your government's doing and what crises you might face. But truly, we've seen internet connectivity because it's so flexible and it's so dynamic and ability to adjust to situations. We've seen governments benefit highly from putting that investment in. So I think that when you think about how to prioritize these issues, there's almost no investment that governments make in trying to do this digital transformation that I don't think will have a high payoff. And to that extent, even if it's just starting with one project, one planning, starting with improving the broadband in your country, it's every bit of infrastructure you build, every bit of digital transformation you do makes the next one easier. And so I guess I want to advocate that unlike some other bread and butter priorities, there is a leveraging and a payback on the ICT internet side that may not be obvious.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate your answer. It's really not a question of either or. We have to do both. We have to deal with the bread and butter issues, but we have to look at the transformation of our public services to drive our future social and economic development. In Barbados' case, the government pretty early also negotiated a $40 million loan for public sector modernization, including the building of public infrastructure, of IT infrastructure in the public service and digital transformation, the implementation of the e-services platform and digital IDs and so on. So, and of course, the international funding agencies do have resources available to help in this initiative. So that in itself will help to develop the ICT sector. That itself will help to create employment and deal with the bread and butter issues. So I think the two are very much connected. Thanks for your answer. I'll move over to a question from Ria Yorching, who is asking us, seeing that Caribbean countries are at different stages of this transformation process, early, already active in policy, infrastructure, and initiatives, what entry points do you see to being cohesive and integrated in implementation? And this is for both panelists. So yes, we are at different stages of development. What are the entry points? And how do we, I wouldn't say level the playing field per se, but we're starting at different stages. In the case, I know within the single ICT space, for example, and in FG's presentation, there was a discussion of wide area networks. Barbados has had one for some time. And I know in a few countries that when I was with the CTU, we worked on the development of wide area network strategies and design for several, but we are clearly at different stages within CARICOM community. How do we move forward collectively? What are the entry points at which we can move forward with a more cohesive manner? I think, Bernadette, you may have a handle on that, but certainly I'd like to hear John's views as well.
Yes, indeed. And I think our 21st Century Government Program recognizes that the countries are at different stages of development. And we at the CTU, we have been working. Now, there's just some certain fundamental things that have to be put in place, right? And the whole issue of the enabling environment, that is one of the things that absolutely have to be addressed. And how we look at it, there are some countries who are very far ahead And we have been encouraging them to share their expertise, to share their model laws, so that countries that are further behind do not have to reinvent the wheel. The issue of wide area networks, as Rodney mentioned, we have a project. We actually have gone in and designed the government-wide area networks and advised the governments on what needs to be done. And they're all very willing, but the challenge has been, financing. Technology costs. It costs something. And we have been encouraging our members to work together on joint procurement of resources, of using, instead of paying top dollar for a national system, can we have a regional ICT system that serves a number of countries? These are the things that we have been advocating. Some of the countries have already started sort of reaching out to other countries who are further ahead in terms of getting support and insight and understanding of how you move a particular process forward.
Countries such as Estonia?
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to put that in context.
Yes, and even within the Caribbean.
Okay.
Even within the Caribbean. And Estonia is a wonderful example of what a small country can do and what a small country can accomplish, right? And I always use it, and from that point of view alone, because I really believe that within the Caribbean, we have an untapped pool of expertise and talent that we are not leveraging. And at the end of the day, you have to understand that how we implement things, there's a whole cultural dimension to certain things, to how you implement. You know, in some countries, when the government says jump, everybody's jumping, right? In other countries, you know, you can't approach it like that. So we have to be very careful of, we certainly would take best practices, but we have to make sure it is relevant and it recognizes the cultural differences and the current circumstances, the current environment in which we operate. So you just cannot take stuff from other places and slap it into your country and expect it to work. And I believe that we have the talent in the region. I think we've proved it because last year when we created our Caribbean Futurescape, we recreated a working model of a Caribbean single market and economy enabled by a CARICOM single ICT space. And much of the talent to make it work so that you had seamless government services, that you had a digital courtroom, that you had a digital medical center, all of these services that were provided in that space were done by Caribbean people. So we have the talent and we have to leverage that talent. I'm sorry, I've just sort of lost.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I believe you're referring to Caribbean Futurescape.
Yes, I was. Yeah. Yes. And we have the talent. And what I'm saying is, even within the Caribbean, the ministers, I'm seeing the signs that they're talking, our ICT ministers, but we have to do a lot more of that. And for the countries that are further ahead, the question that was asked, we're at different stages of development, we have to help those who are further behind. And that is really what the spirit of CARICOM is all about, cooperation, so that we all move together as a region. And we have to foster or cultivate the mechanisms that enable us to collaborate and cooperate on a meaningful basis. Yes, and it goes beyond just the time when the CARICOM heads of government meet. We have to have other functional, practical, reasonable mechanisms that would allow this sort of collaboration amongst heads of government and amongst the ministers, and not just in ICT, but across the board in all sectors.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answer. And I actually appreciate the questions coming from the online audience. We do have some more. John, do you care to respond to that last question, or should we?
I think Bernadette did a fine job.
Thank you very much. I think so too. So our next question is from Stacey Hughes, one of our Zoom participants on a local. I hope I did pronounce it correctly. Apologies if I didn't. On a local level, how can we as citizens and engineers facilitate the cooperation of our ministerial silos, such as to help our educators who desperately need more technologies than just online learning? How can we help with the back-end technologies that make it easier for everyone? From education to BMV, I believe is motor vehicles, to voter registration. And they reference California's motor vehicle initiative from the 90s. How can I help the USVI come to the 21st century governance model? And I link it to a comment from SG Lewis with respect to leveraging our talent pool, and not leveraging our talent pool, and so on, and finding solutions outside of the region, of course, not really building capacity in the process. So how can we really leverage our citizens and our engineers to help us drive this digital transformation in a nutshell?
Rodney, if I could speak to that a little bit. Actually, Bernadette mentioned this as well in her remarks. She indicated there's untapped resources in all the Caribbean islands. There are resources and knowledge that could be brought to bear. And I guess the advice is actually more to the governments to help make that happen. The way, if nothing else, both CTU and ARIN have worked together to do ICT weeks in many of the countries. We encourage countries to continue to have the sort of ICT gathering to talk about information technologies and internet in their country. Sometimes it's not necessarily the work that goes on in a forum talking about improving connectivity or improving education, but sometimes it's the people gathering in the room and realizing, oh, I have people of local talents who know internet or back end or servers or webs that happen during those events that run 2 or 3 days. You get to see your ICT pool of talent. And a lot of these people have knowledge that they've brought. They're either because of their careers or their work, they've brought it and they're available. So my answer is, it's certainly hard if you're in a local country to try to contribute if there's no mechanism. But if the country can provide just a gathering to talk about their ICT roadmap, broadband connectivity, their plans for digital government, then they'd be amazed at the people available who are interested in that and may even be able to help lend expertise and talent. So we certainly, ARIN has sponsored some of these. We're willing to continue to sponsor those. A little challenging in, again, a pandemic time, but I ask, government should not overlook their local talent and should arrange for meetings or gatherings so that they can find out who's available and what they know.
Well, I appreciate your answer with respect to what is happening and how we can engage. You did mention sponsorship. A lot of these events are sponsored, and I'd like to raise that issue, whether or not, because they're sponsored and by the big names often, Amazon Web Services, not to call any names, which I did, but the big companies, the Microsoft and so on, and because they're sponsored, is there room for local talent and for local engineers to have a space and to present their solutions and to help and to develop?
Rodney, if I may also, it also calls for changes in mindset from the point of view that in too many instances, we perceive what is from the north is better than what we have. Yes, and we've seen it all too often. You bring an expert into your environment. He doesn't understand. The culture is different. The circumstances are different. Everything is different. He has to, if he's going to be effective, he has to learn that environment. When you have people on the ground who understand the environment, who understand the culture, who understand the limitations, who understand, well, you know, sometimes electricity goes and so on and so forth. And it is important to for us to recognize that we have resident talent and to make use of it. Yes. So that is one point that I think needs to be expressed. We have to have confidence in our own ability to chart a course that is correct and proper and right for us.
Thank you very much. We have a comment from Deirdre Williams. It's not a question. I'll just read it and I'll move over to the next question. CARICOM recently connected with the African Union, among other things, to acquire medical supplies. Could this be considered a means of bulk purchasing of technology? A suggestion, not a question. Yes, we've been hearing talks recently about our connection with Africa and the African Union and beyond Africa, or in addition to that, the need for benefiting from economies of scale by you know, even in terms of the acquisition of technology, doing it at a regional level. Is this something that you consider, Bernadette, to be realistic, and what success? And I know in my days at the CTU, we talked about this, and we need to, you know, benefit from economies of scale by doing purchasing at the regional level of technology, and even developing solutions and scaling solutions that are developed locally, indigenous solutions, but scaling them across the region because our individual markets are so small. What has been your experience in this respect?
Right. Yes, actually, quite recently, we have been working with we're building a relationship with some of the African states and indeed the African Pacific ACP, Caribbean Pacific Group. So we are exploring, I suppose we're in an exploratory phase in terms of how we could work more closely together, especially in the area of bringing the needs of small island developing states and developing countries to that larger global discussion. So that is something that we are exploring. The other thing is, you know, because of the standards, how shall I put it, regional standards, it may not be practical to pursue certain volume discounts because equipment may be very, very different from region to region. So that may be an issue, but it's certainly the whole thought of collective or joint procurement procedures in the region. That is also that is something that we are definitely pushing and pursuing. That's my short answer, Rodney.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to go over to the next question, which is from Denzel West. And he's asking, which Caribbean countries have an integrated software platform application that we consider to be a center of excellence for delivery of citizen services that the other countries should try to emulate? And I'll just add to that, that while I was with the CTU, of course, one of my responsibilities was the Center of Excellence. And really what he's asking is, within the region, yes, we understand Estonia and South Korea and gov.uk and all of these global examples, but within the region, are you seeing examples of excellence that we can point to that perhaps the other countries can emulate?
I'm gonna have to yield that to yourself and Bernadette.
Both of you. Well, John, I mean, you move throughout the region as well, and you see the uptake of resources. And
so let me address a generic aspect of that question.
Yeah.
So there's a certain truth that we touched on earlier, which is that there's expertise in every Caribbean country, and there's to some extent different circumstances, local factors in every Caribbean country. if you were talking about building something that truly was extremely complicated, you wanted to build a system that required thousands of man hours, then I understand the need to look for best in practice platforms throughout the Caribbean and leverage those. But I don't want to oversimplify, but much of what government does in terms of record keeping is actually relatively straightforward. And it's now possible, things that would have been 10 years ago involving building a network and a data center and air conditioning and servers and backups and disks and all of that infrastructure now is turnkey. So there's a whole layer of expertise at the lower layers, just like the internet is a utility. Now a whole computing and hosting infrastructure that's utility now, and it's been
John, sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt. I'm going to challenge you on that point because you mentioned its utility, and of course, cloud is a big issue now, and the ease of which you can, there's turnkey infrastructure. But where is that turnkey infrastructure? Where does that reside? Is it residing within the region? Is it residing within the developed countries? And what are the implications?
So I want to. I believe in local autonomy. I believe that traffic should stay local. I believe that services should be hosted local. But if you waited for everyone to have local connectivity before you actually had internet connectivity, we wouldn't have connectivity in many parts of the world. It's necessary for people to start with internet connectivity and then build their local exchanges. To a similar extent, if the only way you can do your digital transformation is to leverage common hosting infrastructure that may be elsewhere, then it's worth doing because it's not a unique problem. And it is something that you can take whole layers and outsource. It is easy to bring that back. If you've developed it properly, applications are relatively mobile and you can actually set up infrastructure that's containerized that allows that. So I would not hesitate to leverage utility compute infrastructure and focus on what's local to you, your local application, your local services. You can always bring those back in country. You can always create infrastructure to host them, but don't let trying to build everything, particularly commodity functions, get in the way of your digital transformation.
Got you loud and clear. Thank you very much. Bernadette, what are the Estonias of the Caribbean?
Right.
Who can we emulate? What are we seeing in terms of success stories in the region?
What I could say is that some of the countries have done very well in terms of introducing e-government services. St. Kitts and Nevis, I think Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica has done quite a bit. And, a lot of work is happening in other countries. But my concern has been that the approach has essentially been siloed. And I think Denzel's question refers to the whole issue of that seamless government. And I think the realization is becoming, more and more are realizing that it's not sufficient just to have these services on a ministerial basis. It doesn't really improve the efficiency because the citizens still has to run around to 20 ministries to get the information. So I think now that the thinking and the recognition that platform, that layer that integrates all of the information from these various services are necessary. But I am very, as I said, as John rightly said, I am very encouraged because of COVID-19. You are hearing the ministers, you are hearing the government say, we have to move in this direction. And whereas I could not get an audience with certain major players in the region a year ago, the thinking has changed, and you're now hearing them saying what we have been saying for some time. So we are using this opportunity to get the information out there. We have established the Caribbean Internet Development Foundation that is going to harness, and John, as John mentioned, harness the expertise and the resources in those multi-stakeholder communities and bring them to bear in the governments of the region, so that we're not just going to be doing training for training's sake. It is training with the view to implement a particular project or to deliver a particular service. It's going to be very, very focused, and we're doing this through our Caribbean Internet Development Foundation. And we are going to be specifying, what are the parameters, what are the criteria, what are the things that will, how do you say, what makes a country a 21st century government country? And for example, your IPv6 right through, you have your own ASNs, and we will be specifying this so that countries could measure where they have the progress they are making as they transform to 21st century governments. So in answer to Denzel's question, let's just say that the countries are working on it at this point in time. And I'm looking forward to the time when I'll be able to point and say, well, this country has a 21st century government. The information is seamlessly transmitted across all of the ministries and the agencies, and they're delivering the services digitally to their clients and internal stakeholders and external stakeholders and citizens. They're working towards it. It's a journey.
Thank you very much, Bernadette. I'm going to wrap up with just one more question and then allow for 2 minutes or even less for a wrap up with panelists. You mentioned the measurements and so on. Of course, a lot of our countries now are obsessed with the global indices such as ease of doing business, the ITU readiness, the World Economic Forum, and all of that, all of which we rank very poorly within the region. And that's something I think that we need to consider. Is that important? Is that relevant to us? Should we even consider that? And is that something we need to be working on, or should we just focus on our own regional imperatives? Now, the last question is from Lynette Taylor. No relation. Actually, there is a relation. Does the concept of using local ICT talent and skill at the level about which Bernadette spoke present a challenge for governments when funding for ICT is coming from international agencies, some with very strict qualifying parameters for the financing of this program? So I spoke about the IDB funded projects, but of course these are open to international tenders and very strict bidding requirements. And does that sort of exclude, or is that disadvantageous for local talent with respect to bidding and projects of that nature? Just 30 seconds each if you both care to respond, and then I'll allow the closing statements because we just have 3 minutes left.
Rodney, my view is that development is something that we do for ourselves, right? And if we consider our developmental agenda, we have to be forthright in putting up the funding to do it, to get it done. I can't want a 2-car garage and a tennis court and a swimming pool and expect my neighbor down the road to pay for it. Yes, and in so doing, when you sorry.
It's a good analogy.
So this is it. And when you go down the way of the IDAs, yes, you get the funding, but the funding, it does not necessarily help you. And you want the responsibility of the government is to help develop its citizens. And if you have talent out there, you have to do the programs that really cultivate that talent and bring it to a standard where it serves the country.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. So basically make digital transformation a bread and butter issue and pay for it. We also have a regional financing institutions such as the CDB as well. And I think that's something that we also need to consider. John, I'm going to allow you to respond to that and also give a closing statement, closing statement to Bernadette, and then I'll just wrap up the session today.
Yeah, I will pick up what Bernadette said there and what your remarks as well. I believe that it needs to be a bread and butter issue. It needs to be funded. It is no longer the costs that we were talking about in the past. There is leverageable code, leverageable tool sets, open source. There's a when you have a handful of people building an application on the global internet now and doing it in the course of a few months, that happens every day all over the world. So I would say, if it turns out that you have to meet a straitjacket to get funding and certain assumptions about how you're using it, it may not be that that funding's worthwhile. If someone's truly trying to help them, make them help you in a way that's suitable, or help yourself. Because quite frankly, there's no dollar you invest in your own local expertise, your own local infrastructure, that isn't going to pay off far more handsomely.
All right, thank you very much. Closing statements, both panelists, just 30 seconds. Over to you, Bernadette, and then to John, and then I'll just conclude the session. Thank you.
Yes, digital transformation, and it is a collective responsibility. And we really have to change the mindset so that we know we have to work with each other, not in the private sector, civil society, government, multi-stakeholder organizations. All of us have a part to play. And I am encouraging, to push the participants here, get the message out, that this has to be done. As I said, that COVID-19 window is closing. But we have an opportunity here. Let's beat the iron while it's hot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
I would say we need to take this opportunity and leverage it, most certainly, because this is now a time people are waking up and realizing that we can do more. We can leverage ICT and the internet to do things that in a more efficient manner. And I think that it's an opportunity for governments to realize that the flexibility and the investment return, the return on investing in their own talent, their own people, is worthwhile and gives them, enables them to prepare for the future. I think we would be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to encourage every government to move ahead and take this opportunity to invest in its own local future, because, as I said, this is the time we're waking up and seeing what a big difference it makes, having the ability to do all this online.
Thank you very much to both our very distinguished panelists. I've been honored to moderate this session today, and I thank all of our participants, both on Zoom and on YouTube, for attending and for the questions. We had no shortage of questions today. We invite you to register for the other sessions. Basically, over the next 3 weeks, the sessions happen every Thursday at 10 a.m. and we invite you to register. Our next webinar in the series is Local IXPs, no longer an option, now an imperative for 21st century governments, and that takes place next week, Thursday, 10 a.m. Speakers include Curly Prescott, Country Manager, Managing Director, Columbus Communications, Trinidad Limited, and Brent McIntosh, CTO, MacNet Solutions, Junior McIntyre, Consultant, Caribbean Telecommunications Union. I really appreciate your presentations today. To our panelists, I appreciate your questions. To our online audience and to our YouTube visitors, it's been a stimulating discussion. If nothing else, we've established that digital transformation is a bread and butter issue. And we really need to make it such, and it's so critical to our future development of the region. Thank you all so much, and see you next week.